On Tuesday, March 26, 1991, a classic case occurred on a mountain named Waryong in the southeastern city of Daegu, South Korea. To this day, this case remains listed among the top 3 most mysterious unsolved cases in Korean history. At 8:20 a.m. on March 26, 1991, 6 boys were playing together. These children were Kim Jong-sik, 9 years old, Park Chan-in, 10 years old, Kim Young-ji-wyu, 11 years old, Jo Ho-yeon, 12 years old, Woo Chul-won, 13 years old, and Kim Tae-ryong, 9 years old. They were all students at Seongseo Elementary School in Daegu. The school was located right at the foot of Waryong Mountain, and the boys' homes were in nearby villages. While playing near Jo Ho-yeon's house, a neighbor came out complaining that the children were too noisy and chased them away. The boys then gathered together, and one of them suggested going to nearby Waryong Mountain to hunt for fire salamander eggs. The entire group of 6 agreed. After deciding on their destination, the group dispersed, each boy going home to get supplies and inform their families. Among the 6, Kim Tae-ryong, after telling his parents about the plan, was not allowed to go because his parents thought it was too far. Regretfully, he had to forego the mountain trip. Thus, the group was reduced to 5 boys, some carrying empty boxes to hold eggs and others with wooden sticks. The 5 boys laughed and joked as they headed toward Waryong Mountain. At 12 o'clock noon, the parents of the boys noticed that their children had not returned home yet. They assumed the boys had lost track of time while playing and did not pay much attention. However, by 6:30 p.m., the boys were still not home, and Kim Yong-ju's mother began to feel uneasy. She stopped her work and went to the homes of Kim Yong-ju's friends to see if he was playing there. Although Waryong Mountain was not far from home and the boys had been there before, it was unusual for them not to have returned by this time, no matter how much they were enjoying themselves. On her way, she saw many people gathered, discussing something. Upon approaching, she found out that the 5 boys who went up the mountain that morning had not returned home. Everyone discussed the situation, and the worried parents quickly took flashlights and went up the mountain to search. They called out their children's names but received no response. At 7:50 p.m., after searching for a long time without finding any trace of the boys, they descended the mountain and reported the incident to the police. However, the police did not immediately launch a search operation because most of the force had been deployed elsewhere to maintain order for the parliamentary elections. Additionally, the boys had not been missing for 24 hours yet, so the officer on duty told the parents not to worry too much and that the children would probably return home soon. Seeing the police's inaction, the parents did not give up and continued their search on the mountain. Some kind-hearted neighbors joined them. Unfortunately, that evening it started to rain, making the search even more difficult. Wearing raincoats and using flashlights, they searched Waryong Mountain thoroughly, but to no avail. The search continued until 3 a.m. when everyone was exhausted and had to stop and return home. The next day, more than 300 people, including police and military personnel, along with helicopters, were mobilized to search Waryong Mountain and the surrounding areas. Virtually every inch of the area was meticulously combed. Near Waryong Mountain, there was a reservoir where a tragic drowning of a child had previously occurred. Some suspected that after playing on the mountain, the boys might have gone to the reservoir and accidentally fallen in. To verify this hypothesis, the rescue team used pumps to drain the reservoir, but unfortunately, nothing was found. The police also conducted a door-to-door inquiry among residents living near Waryong Mountain, gathering some information from witnesses. Jo Ho-yeon's older brother, one of the missing boys, reported to the police that around 9 a.m. that day, he saw his younger brother and 4 other boys heading up the mountain while he was biking home. He asked his brother where they were going, and the boy cheerfully replied that they were looking for fire salamander eggs. The older brother then reminded Jo Ho-yeon to come home for lunch before leaving. A woman reported to the police that around 9:30 a.m. that day, after voting, she saw 5 children carrying boxes and sticks, joyfully heading towards Waryong Mountain. She overheard them discussing whether they would be home in time for lunch, but she was in a hurry and didn't pay much attention. A boy named Hyun Seung-hoon, a classmate of the 5 victims, stated that he and his friends also went to Waryong Mountain to play that day, but he did not see the 5 victims. At 11:30 a.m., while near the cemetery on the mountain, he suddenly heard a terrifying scream from a distance, followed by another scream about 10 seconds later. The screams were scary and did not sound like normal play. Frightened, he did not dare to find out where the screams came from. The police speculated that the screams could have been from birds or wild animals on the mountain, as another witness reported seeing the 5 boys at the mountain's entrance around noon the same day. A 42-year-old resident also mentioned that around 4:30 p.m. the same day, he saw the 5 children playing near a pond close to the village. Despite collecting numerous testimonies, all the statements might have been unreliable due to their reliance on personal memory, which could lead to significant discrepancies affecting the police's judgment. At this point, the police suspected that the children might have had a conflict with their families, leading them to run away and get lost. However, the parents all denied this hypothesis, asserting that their families were very harmonious and that they did not scold or beat their children. The children had no reason to run away. The police then shifted their investigation towards the possibility of an acquaintance committing the crime, suspecting that the victims' families might have had a conflict with someone. However, after investigation, the police determined that the families of the 5 children were good-natured people who lived harmoniously with their neighbors and had no significant conflicts with anyone. Even if there were minor disputes, they were not severe enough to harm innocent children. Soon after, the news of the disappearance of the 5 boys on Waryong Mountain reached the then president of South Korea, Roh Tae-woo. He showed great concern for the case and instructed the police to spare no effort in the investigation, demanding that they find the 5 boys by any means necessary. However, all police investigations reached a deadlock. Every argument proposed by the police was disproven, and the disappearance of the 5 children on Waryong Mountain became increasingly difficult and mysterious. On March 29th, Kim Jong-sik's family received a phone call from a strange man claiming to have kidnapped the 5 boys. He demanded the family bring $2,900 to Waryong Mountain for their release. Kim Jong-sik's father hurriedly gathered the money and rushed to the meeting point, but he waited for a long time without anyone showing up, and the man never called back. On April 1st, the parents of the missing boys printed 50,000 flyers to distribute at train stations, bus stations, and public places in Daegu. They also offered a reward of $1,453 for any useful information about their children's whereabouts. As the case garnered more public attention, the phone numbers of the boys' families were leaked. The police installed wiretaps on these phone lines and subsequently received many calls. Upon answering, they would hear children's voices followed by the sound of the phone hanging up. After investigation, the police concluded that most of these were prank calls. Nonetheless, it was possible that the real perpetrator had called, but there was no way to confirm this. In August 1992, the police received a call from a strange man claiming that the boys' bodies were buried in the basement of a building in Gyeongsangbuk-do. When the police asked for more details, the man abruptly hung up. The described building was the only one with a basement near the boys' homes. The police investigated but found nothing and concluded it was another malicious prank. During the search, reporters accompanying the police had disputes with local residents. The prolonged investigation without results left the parents of the boys in despair. Despite continuous misinformation, the police did not give up hope, believing there was still a chance the boys were alive, possibly kidnapped or sold elsewhere. The reward for finding the boys was increased to $30,525. The parents of the 5 boys quit their jobs, bought a truck, and traveled around Daegu and even the entire country, distributing flyers to find their children. Some businesses voluntarily helped by printing the boys' pictures on phone cards, cigarette packages, and food packaging. The images of the 5 boys were even printed on a giant hot air balloon, and media channels produced advertisements for the missing children on TV. By November that year, the police had received nearly 1,000 calls, but most provided false information. Many rumors began to circulate. Some said the boys were kidnapped by North Korean spies. Others claimed they were taken by people with Hansen's disease for treatment. More bizarre rumors suggested the boys were not human and were abducted by aliens. Throughout the prolonged search campaign, approximately 320,000 people from all walks of life, including the military, participated. In 1995, 4 years after the case, the police used computers to create age-progressed portraits of the boys, distributing more than 2 million flyers, but the results were still false leads. In their desperation, the police even consulted shamans to help locate the boys. Over time, the case gradually faded into obscurity, and the parents had to return to work to sustain their livelihoods. In January 1996, Professor Kim Ka-won, a criminal psychology expert from the Korea Institute of Science and Technology, unexpectedly declared that the boys had been murdered by Kim Jong-sik's father, Kim Chil-gyu, and that their bodies were buried in his house. Kim Chil-gyu was furious at this accusation, insisting he could never commit such a cruel act against his own children. Despite his grief and anger, he agreed to let the police excavate his house to prove his innocence. In January 1996, following Professor Kim's directions, the police began digging and demolishing Kim Chol-gyu's house. A large crowd of curious onlookers gathered, wanting to see if the man was indeed a murderer. The police excavated every part of the house, from the bathroom and storage room to the yard, with reporters documenting the event. After 1 hour and 40 minutes, the house was left in ruins, but nothing was found. The crowd fell silent upon seeing the empty house. Kim Chil-gyu, overwhelmed with emotion, cried out in anguish, stating, "Losing my children has been incredibly painful, and now I'm struggling to live on. To be falsely accused of burying their bodies in my house is absurd." Following this incident, Professor Kim Ka-won faced intense public criticism. His baseless theory caused immense suffering for Kim Chil-gyu's family. Professor Kim was later dismissed from the institute and prosecuted for defamation, although he continued to defend his viewpoint and even published a book titled "The Children Didn't Go to the Mountain." Although exonerated, Kim Chil-gyu's mental health deteriorated significantly after this ordeal. He fell into alcoholism and eventually died of liver cancer in October 2001. On September 26, 2002, the Daegu police received a call from a 60-year-old man. He reported that while climbing the mountain to collect chestnuts, he discovered what appeared to be clothes buried in the ground. Out of curiosity, he dug around and was shocked to uncover a human skull. In fact, the day before, the police had received a similar call from someone who reported seeing remains on Waryong Mountain. However, due to the thorough search of the area previously conducted and the numerous prank calls received over the years, the police had dismissed the call as another malicious prank. But after receiving the second call, the police paid attention and immediately sent officers to the location provided by the informant. In a shallow pit, they found 4 sets of remains stacked on top of each other, with a large rock placed over the bones. About 150 meters away, they found the 5th set of remains. On the skulls of 3 of the bodies, there were various sized holes. The clothes found on the ground were separate from the bones and were tied together. Although the bodies were completely decomposed, the families of the 5 boys identified the clothes as those their children were wearing on the day they disappeared. Over 10 years had passed, and the parents, who had always hoped their children were alive somewhere, were devastated by the tragic news. After discovering the remains of the 5 children, the police hypothesized that the boys had been playing on the mountain until late that evening and got lost. To avoid being separated, they tied their jackets together to form a long rope and held hands. As the temperature dropped at night, they huddled together for warmth and might have accidentally hit sharp rocks, causing them to lose consciousness. However, this hypothesis was entirely rejected by the victims' families. They argued that their homes were very close to the base of Waryong Mountain, and it was not the first time the boys had been there. Moreover, the mountain was not high, and even at night, the lights from the houses at the foot of the mountain were clearly visible. The location where the bodies were found was only about 3 kilometers from their homes and 500 meters from the nearest village, making it unlikely that the boys had gotten lost. Near the scene, the police found over 10 bullet casings of various types. Given that there was a shooting range of the 50th Infantry Brigade, 2nd Division near Waryong Mountain, the police suspected that the boys might have been killed by stray bullets. However, this theory was also quickly dismissed because it was highly improbable for 5 people to be hit by stray bullets at the same time, no matter how careless. Additionally, if someone had used a gun unauthorized, the gunshots would have been noticed. Upon comparison, the dents on the skulls of the victims did not match gunshot wounds. The bullets found might have simply been picked up by the boys along the way. At this time, the forensic team from Kyungpook National University conducted autopsies. The results showed no clear injuries on the bones of Park Chan-in and Jo Ho-yeon, making it impossible to determine the cause of death. The other 3 boys, Kim Jong-sik, Kim Yong-ji-yu, and Woo Chil-won, had multiple injuries on their skulls, including fractures and holes. Kim Jong-sik had a broken left arm. Among the 5 victims, Woo Chil-won, the oldest, had the most injuries, with up to 25 wounds on his body. The specific time of death for the victims could not be determined, but was likely on the day of their disappearance. The forensic team concluded that the 5 boys had been murdered. After numerous tests, they finally identified a possible weapon that could have caused similar injuries to the victims' skulls. It was a tool with a sharp end and a flat end, used for scraping welding slag. This tool was not commonly used, but was essential for welders. However, finding the perpetrator with just this clue was extremely difficult. Based on the collected evidence, the police reconstructed the events of the case as follows. The 5 boys went to Waryong Mountain to play and then dispersed throughout the forest to search for fire salamander eggs. During this time, they were suddenly attacked by a stranger. Woo Chil-won, being the oldest, resisted the attacker and thus suffered the most severe injuries. Kim Jong-sik ran, but was caught from behind and struck with the weapon. He instinctively raised his left arm to protect himself, and the attacker took this opportunity to hit him on the head, causing him to collapse. Kim Yong-ji-yu also tried to escape, and during the struggle, his shirt and buttons were torn. He was ultimately struck on the head and fell. After killing the 3 boys, the attacker restrained Park Chan-in and Jo Ho-yeon to prevent them from escaping. He took off their clothes, tied them together, and strangled them to death, leaving no marks on their bones. After ensuring the boys were dead, the attacker buried their bodies in a pit and placed a large rock over them, possibly to prevent them from climbing out or to mark the location. The attacker might have returned to Waryong Mountain after the incident or lived nearby. His behavior seemed both calculated and spontaneous. The calculation lay in the choice of weapon, a tool not commonly carried around, suggesting prior preparation. However, the spontaneity was evident in the random nature of the attack, as the boys had only decided to go to the mountain that morning without any prior plan. The analyses by experts were quickly reported by the media, causing a lot of controversy among the public. Many people raised questions, such as why no hair or teeth were found at the scene, given that these do not decompose easily. This led to suspicions that the bodies were not originally buried at that location. Additionally, the way the clothes were tied was not common in everyday life. Others criticized the police for acting too hastily and not protecting the crime scene properly, showing a lack of professionalism. The use of pickaxes to dig and then randomly placing the remains in bags was condemned. At the scene, the police only examined one set of remains before hastily concluding that the cause of death was getting lost in hypothermia. Many people also wondered why the police did not find the bodies during their thorough search of the area years ago. The police did not provide an official answer to this question. It could be that the bodies were buried too deep and only became exposed due to weathering and landslides over the years. Or the bodies were moved to the mountain after the initial search was completed, creating a perfect time gap. At that time, Waryong Mountain was quite deserted. The boys might have encountered a mentally ill person with a history of illness or a serial killer with antisocial tendencies. Some speculated that the case happened during the local council elections, and someone might have deliberately caused trouble on Waryong Mountain for political gain, resulting in the boys' tragic fate. In March 2006, 15 years after the incident, the statute of limitations for criminal cases in South Korea at that time expired. This meant that even if the perpetrator came forward, they could not be held criminally responsible. From that year, a new rumor began to spread among the public, claiming that the perpetrator was a family living on Waryong Mountain. This family had a mentally disabled son and owned a hunting dog. Normally, the dog was kept chained, but on the day of the incident, the owners released the dog to clean and repair its kennel. The son did not supervise the dog properly, and it ran out and attacked the 5 boys playing on the mountain. Fearing exposure, the family ruthlessly killed the boys to cover up the incident. They then moved away and kept the secret for many years. However, their guilt eventually led them to confess the story to someone. This rumor spread rapidly among the South Korean public, with many believing it to be true. However, it remained just a rumor without any concrete evidence from authorities. In 2021, another rumor emerged, suggesting that the perpetrator was a teacher from the boys' school. On one hand, the teacher was familiar with the area's terrain. On the other hand, it was common practice at the time for teachers to use corporal punishment to discipline students, which could have made it easy for the teacher to control the boys. Some reporters investigated this theory and concluded that it was completely baseless. A year later, another post appeared on social media proposing that the weapon used in the crime was a metal ruler and that the perpetrator could have been a high school student from a nearby school. These metal rulers were capable of inflicting significant harm. According to investigations, there had been instances of students using such rulers to fight in schools near Daegu's mountains. Some students often gathered on the mountain to smoke and drink, leading this person to believe that the 5 boys might have been attacked by a group of delinquent students. However, this hypothesis also sparked controversy. Some argued that although the injuries on the victims' skulls resembled those caused by a ruler, to create such wounds, the ruler would have to be over 30 centimeters long. This type of ruler was bulky, difficult to carry, and would have attracted attention, making this scenario highly unlikely. To this day, the deaths of the 5 frog boys remain a mystery. Initially, The media reported that the five boys had gone to the mountain to catch frogs, hence the nickname the Frog Boys. However, in reality, they were searching for fire salamander eggs. The nickname the Frog Boys has continued to be used for convenience in public understanding. Since 1992, there have been two films based on the events of the Frog Boys' case, which have captivated and drawn attention from the public. The disappearance of the Frog Boys has become a haunting memory for the South Korean people, exposing flaws in the security system and raising alarms about child protection mechanisms. Many parents have lived in constant fear and anxiety, worried that their own children might